What is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson. Today, joined by my co-hosts, Anthony Rivardo and Colin Outcaves. Today, we're kind of traveling back in time to the trade deadline when the Rangers and the Rangers fans really wanted to see us go out and give up everything for Jake Guentzel. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for looking back on it, he went to the Carolina Hurricanes. We beat them, didn't get them a Stanley Cup. So the Rangers avoided giving up their entire future for this guy who ultimately didn't win anything with anyone. But now he's a free agent, restricted free agent, I might add. Carolina has announced that they're willing to trade his signing rights for a mid-round pick. So kind of looking back on it, Rangers made a smart decision, didn't give up everything, and now they can pretty much go out and get the signing rights for a very cheap price. So we'll be diving into this possibility of the Rangers might possibly being reinterested in him. We'll see what happens in the future, but we'll give our takes on it today. But before we do, make sure you guys like, subscribe, ring that bell so you miss notification. Leave your thoughts on this possible trade down in the comment section below. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. But before we really get into it, Anthony, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm great, and I know that this is going to be an interesting topic of conversation. And all offseason long, we're going to be having discussions about potential trade targets, free agent targets for the Rangers, and they're primarily going to be focused on that first-line right wing. And I think I'm going to be the contrarian opinion on a lot of these episodes because, as we kind of started to talk about before we began recording, you guys want players in their prime who are going to make this impact and kind of reinforce this cup window and make this final push to try and do this thing. And I lean more towards going after some youthful talent and setting this team up for a brighter future. So I think it'll be an interesting debate here as we kind of discuss Jake Guentzel, what his potential acquisition to the Rangers could mean for the team, and whether or not we all think that that's the move that they should be making. So I'm excited to kind of dive into it and discuss, because I think there is a little more nuance to this conversation than people might realize.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I'm excited to actually have some debates on this channel. But Colin, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm tired. I'm
Okay,
but yeah, no, I'm doing my best. But got to watch the first game of the Stanley Cup final last night. Good to have some hockey back on because it gave us like a week of nothing, which was miserable. Have I told you my plan for what I'm rooting for the Cup final?
No, I haven't heard it.
It's people might not like it, but I am rooting for the Panthers only because I want a disgruntled McDavid to leave and down the line follow in Gretzky's footsteps and come to the Rangers.
That's a valid plan. I will say I didn't watch game one last night. I don't care. It's still fresh. The wound is fresh. It hurts.
Yeah.
And I don't want to watch any Stanley Cup Finals hockey that the Rangers are not included in. So I'll watch an elimination game maybe, but I don't know. We'll see how this series progresses. It's not looking good for Edmonton right now. But,
no, it's definitely tough watching, but it gets a little easier each day. I just come to terms with the loss each day, and then it's just next season. Next season's our season now.
Yeah, we'll see. In order for it to be our season next season, the Rangers do need to go out and get a first-line right winger. So let's talk about Jake Guentzel a little bit here. To me, the situation that we're looking at, it's like a double-edged sword where the Rangers can go out and trade for him for like a minimum of a fifth-round pick. I know we talked about that as well. Mid-round pick, how do we define that? 7 rounds in the draft, so like 3 through 5 really we're considering. Even a third-round pick just for signing rights, I'd be more than happy to pay that for him. The only problem is then you got to go and extend him. And, he's coming off of a contract that was $6 million average annual value. Guy's going to be looking for a pay raise. I would have to assume minimum $8 million, probably more than that, like 9 or even 10 maybe. So the guy's going to come at a pretty hefty price. But, Anthony, like you mentioned, he is a guy in his prime, which is kind of what me and Colin are looking for right now. He's 29 right now. So I think if the Rangers can lock him up for like 5 seasons, I think would be the most ideal contract. But, I have to assume he's going to be looking for like a full 7-year extension. But we'll see. I don't know. It kind of depends on the price point for me, if I think this would be worth it. Obviously, the Rangers don't have that much money to spend right now, but the salary cap is going to go up by $4.5 million this summer. So that's a benefit as well. But, as Rangers got to sign maybe Kakko, probably Lindgren, Schneider, a couple other guys as well. And then obviously, as we've talked about the last few episodes, that massive Igor Shesterkin and Alexei Lafreniere extensions are coming up just next year. So it has everything to make it look like the perfect deal, other than the fact that it's going to cost a lot of money. Guentzel is a really good player. He's won a couple of cups, but I don't know, Anthony. I know you might disagree with that, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this possibility.
Well, one thing that I do want to throw out there, and just to kind of put caution to the wind for Rangers fans, yes, the salary cap is going up $4.5 million, so you assume that the team has a little bit more money to spend. Usually doesn't work that way in major sports leagues. When the salary cap goes up, so do the players' demands. They feel like they own a little bit more of a share of the wealth now. So the contractual demands of, let's say, Igor Shesterkin, for example, we've kind of talked about how he might be pushing for $12 million AAV. That's because he knows the salary cap is going up. So he's going to push that number as high as he can. It's really about percentages. You're always signing players to a percentage of the salary cap space. And Igor is looking for a certain percentage of the salary cap space to be his salary. And so will Jake Guentzel. He'll look for the same thing. So whether you thought that he was worth $7 million before, he might be worth $8 million now because the salary cap went up. So I don't really think that the Rangers have extra money to spend. They just have more money to accommodate the players' demands. So say the salary cap didn't go up, these players are going to make contractual demands and you wouldn't be able to sign them. Now they just have a better chance of retaining their players, not necessarily going out there with extra money to spend, is kind of how I see it. But with Jake Guentzel, one other thing that I do want to mention, I'll talk about the in his prime versus going after a more youthful player thing in a second. But I do have to point out he is 5'11", right? He's not a big physical bruising forward like I think the Rangers need. I think that one of the problems that they had against the Florida Panthers in this most recent series, and I know I'm not alone in this because a lot of people commented this on the channel, the Rangers are too small and too fast and not physical enough in the postseason. And when you're going up against a team like the Florida Panthers or really any of these physical postseason teams, you do need more physicality in your offensive lines. And I think that Jake Guentzel, while yes, absolutely, he'll make a significant impact, make this team much better, win more regular season games, I do have a fear in the back of my head that the Rangers are going to bring in another 5'11" forward and with a similar size to Panarin, say he's 6 foot. One of these guys who's got this similar kind of archetype and build and make an impact during the regular season, maybe not be as impactful as everybody hopes for him to be during the postseason. That's just kind of one of those thoughts in my head that I would throw caution to the whole idea. And then the other one being, he is 29 in the middle of his prime, and the Rangers have all of these players in the middle of their prime or leaving their prime, as it feels like with Mika Zibanejad potentially and some of these other players. I think that the Rangers need to start targeting players who are in that 25 to 27 age range, not that 28 to 32 age range. Because, yes, those guys are going to make an instant impact, but I am starting to get this worry in the back of my mind where this Rangers team, all of their top players are 30 plus, really. They're all great, tremendous, world-class players, but they're all starting to get past that prime. And I'm worried that the Rangers, if they don't start adding some younger talent to the mix, once those players leave their prime, they're still going to be on these bloated contracts. The Rangers are going to have a really tough time getting younger if they don't start to get younger now. I think the best teams in sports plan ahead. So when you have all of your star players, while they're still effective and they're still superstars, Panarin just went for over 100 points, still a superstar. But if you're not looking to replace Panarin before it's time to replace Panarin, you'll never be able to replace Panarin. And that goes for all of the other top 6 forwards that the Rangers have. So my mindset this offseason, if I were Chris Drury, wouldn't just be to add in as much talent as possible to go for the cup run once again, like they did last year with Tarasenko and Patrick Kane. It's not working. I think that they need to start finding younger talents, developing them properly, guys who will make an impact immediately. They're not going to be top 6, Guentzel impact players. But if you're able to find some younger players who can make an impact and then grow into becoming a superstar in 3 years' time, that's how you continue to build this Rangers roster for sustained success and maybe make a cup run now and in 4 years from now, rather than now and then being in a rebuilding phase in 4 years from now. So while I love the idea of Guentzel and I wouldn't be against it, if the Rangers go out there and they bring him in, I'm going to be hyped up and I'm going to be excited and I'm going to feel like we have an even greater chance at winning the cup this year. I still think that the plan should be to build for the now and for the future, start going after some long-term talents. And I know even in our group chat that we have with Will, our kind of Fireside Rangers co-host group chat, there was the idea of Brennan Othmann being thrown out there in some of these trades. Like to me, or not Brennan Othmann, it was, what's the other kid? Gabe Perreault being thrown out there in some trade offers. That's crazy to me. Like the Rangers do have some talented prospects. they can't just keep trading away young talents for older aging veterans who make an instant impact. This team does need to start building for the future. So again, I'll be happy with Guentzel if it happens, but I would prefer that the Rangers go for somebody who's probably like 3 years younger, can make an impact now, and then develop into an absolute superstar in a few years.
I mean, those are all valid concerns. I don't have that many counterpoints, but just like the reason why I'm not as concerned about trading for an older guy like Guentzel and then like worrying about the future is because our prospect pool is that good. And I will say, like, anytime we've talked about Othman trades, Perot trades, I mean, I've always been against it because to me, I think those guys are the future. Give Gabe Perot 3 or 4 years, and he's just as good as Jake Guentzel or Artemi Panarin. Maybe not as good as Panarin, but good enough to produce efficiently up on that top pairings or top line. So I don't know, like I'm not that concerned about the future just because of how good the prospect pool is, what I'm trying to say. And, as far as Guentzel goes and we talk about his size and the Rangers needing physicality, I will say, yes, we do need physicality, but Jake Guentzel is a proven playoff performer. He won back-to-back Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Given back in that was nearly a decade ago. This 2016 and 2017, he destroyed the Rangers in the first round in 2016. So who knows at this point? It's a different league. He's a different player by now, and the Rangers are built differently than that Pittsburgh team. Maybe the other players around him are more physical than the Rangers would be around him. So, apples and oranges to compare. But I don't know. You make a lot of great points, but like I said, this whole thing is kind of, to me, I look at it like a double-edged sword where I see the pros and I see the cons. To me, I'm still leaning towards we should at least look into it as long as it's cheap enough. But Colin, if you want to break down how you're feeling about this whole situation, I'm curious.
I see both sides. I think it's going to be tough at this point to find a big, bruising, physical guy that you're going to add in your top six, let alone your first line, who's going to make not only that impact physically, but that impact in terms of like points and driving play. There's not a lot of, I feel like there's not a bunch of guys like that who are like that big and also drive play at the level that we're looking for, especially because we need a guy who's going to drive play at 5-on-5, as we said over and over and over again. For me, and also the younger versus older thing, I understand it. But for me, when it comes to rebuilding the youth, it's just through the draft. You look at these teams, you look at Jake Guentzel, former 3rd-round pick. You look at Carolina, who just gave up a lot of players to get Jake Guentzel, and they still have one of the best farm teams because they've hit on a lot of their picks. I think our scouting needs to be a little bit better. Obviously, we've hit on a couple first-round picks over the past few years, whether that's guys like Schneider or Miller or Hedl or Loff, obviously, because we missed on Kakko somehow. But like we have a lot of first-round picks and a couple second-round picks. We're not really hitting on the late picks in those later drafts like other teams are, especially that 3rd round. And more of that second round, people are finding stars and absolute gems. And we're just kind of whiffing. And even when we do, we don't develop them well. So, I think the scouting needs to be better. I think that's how you rebuild your team. I think that when your team is in the cup window, you kind of got to go for it all. And yeah, we have stars now, and you can add a guy who could potentially be a star down the line, but you need somebody right now who's going to help this window, because when Zibanejad and Panarin do go, then you have another star. It's like, okay, well, now he's alone with another young team. You need to have stars with stars, or just tear it all down and start fresh. So for me, I'm not like, it's hard to do. Like, if you look at what the Lightning did, they just got a bunch of talent and then they drafted well, and they would slowly start replacing their talent with young guys, but not like young guys that they went and signed, homegrown prospects, Sorelli and Point and guys like that. They also did very well in the draft with like guys like Killorn and, Palat and Tyler Johnson, obviously Steven Stamkos, Victor Hedman. Like, they hit the lottery over there in terms of drafting guys, but they also acquired a lot of picks when they got guys like Sergachev, before they even started playing for the team. So in terms of building long-term and sustained success, it's just about hitting in the draft and also getting prospects to build up, rather than signing guys who are like younger and have a lot of upside. Not that that doesn't work, but it's just easier, I feel like, in the way that the Lightning did it, and I feel like the way that Detroit's trying to set it up with Yzerman, just because he's a genius over there. But for Guentzel, for me, I'm probably going to lean towards no. That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
And you're also trading for his rights when he has blatantly come out and said, I'm going to test free agency. So, yeah, you get that extended bargaining window with him. He is a UFA. So he can go and talk. Like, he doesn't have to sign with us. There's no arbitration rights. And then he can go and talk to anybody anyway. So, like, it is a bonus that you get to discuss with him a little bit earlier and kind of get your contracts out there. But regardless, he's going to want to test the waters, kind of get a little bit of a bidding war going and drive that price up. And for me, he's a great guy, great player. We've seen it time after time. He's really hurt the Rangers in the playoffs, whether it was last year when he kicked the puck out of the air. Or no, it was 2 years ago. When we went to the conference final, he kicked the puck and then batted it out of the air. Which is just disgusting. To last year, he had the most points of a trade deadline acquisition ever. So, those are definitely cool things, and he doesn't get a lot of his points on the power play. He gets a lot of them at 5-on-5, which is, again, very interesting to me. His time on ice, he can handle those bigger minutes. The average is around 19. But he's just going to come in at too high of a price point. And even if you give him like a longer contract, if you do a Trocheck, then you're just dragging it out down the line, which I agree does hurt us. And you do have to watch the money down the line. That's the one thing that I will 100% agree with you on, Tony, is that these contracts towards the end are definitely going to hurt us. But every team has contracts like that, and that's sometimes you just got to eat it for the chance to win the cup. And if you do, nobody really cares. Nobody looks back and is like, oh, that contract aged terribly. No, you won a damn cup with it, so it doesn't really, you know what I mean? But this is a contract that I don't even think we could fit. Again, it would be a lot of cap juggling. Everything that we talk about with every trade is going to be, who can we get rid of to make space? How much are we really looking for the future, which we are, because Igor and Laf should be like priorities. But you think if we want to be contenders, we need a first line right wing more than anything, in my opinion. Obviously, we really need defense, but I think that first line going completely missing is not going to help anybody. You need to have two solid scoring lines, and then a defensive line, and then a forechecking line just to tire them out. We had the defensive line was good for a while. It kind of fell apart in that last round, and the second line was good until they got locked down and had no support from the first scoring line. So it was like the first scoring line was doing laps out there. The second line was going out. Panarin was getting locked down. Lafreniere and Trocheck were fighting for their lives. Third line goes out there. Kakko and Wimberg are missing empty nets, and they're doing their best defensively. And the fourth line goes out there, and they're contributing what they can, but they're not really meant to do that. So you need a guy in that first line. Obviously, Guentzel's the dream, just like Kachuk. He's also a dream. I just think they're both going to come in too expensive, and that's going to be that, unfortunately.
I also, before I let you jump in, Eric, I do need to point out, I went over to Cap Friendly for the Rangers. I was going here to look at the salary cap space, but then it also showed the draft capital that the Rangers had, and we were talking about mid-round pick for Guentzel. The Rangers do not own a second or a third-round pick in this year's draft or next year's draft. They've traded those away. They've also traded their 2026 second-round pick and 2026 fourth-round pick. They don't have a second, third, or fourth-round pick in 2025, so not only is he expensive in the sense that you're going to have to hand him a high AAV contract, he's also expensive in the fact that the Rangers don't have a whole lot of draft capital. They don't really have a lot to trade for Guentzel. And as you just discussed, Colin, not only would it be smart if the Rangers maybe consider trading for a younger player to develop for the next few years, they also need to start hitting on their mid-round draft picks, but the Rangers just don't have many mid-round draft picks. So I don't really know what the future of this team looks like if they don't start to prioritize youth when next year in 2025 they have a first-round pick, and then they don't pick again until the fifth round. This upcoming offseason, they've got a first-round pick, and then they don't pick again until the fourth round. So if you're trying to trade away your fourth-round pick for Guentzel, you're taking a first-round pick and a fifth-round and a sixth-round pick. Rangers don't even have a seventh-round pick in this year's draft. So how is this team going to continue to build through its youth? How are they going to continue to add to their prospect pool if they keep trading away all these draft picks for aging veterans? That's, again, my main concern. So while I say I'm for it, I'd be happy if Guentzel ends up on the New York Rangers next season. I think that he would fix that first-line right wing and improve our chances of winning the Cup, which I know is the ultimate goal. You still do have to plan for the future. And right now, the Rangers are mortgaging a lot of their future for the present. And I'm starting to get concerned that they're doing too much mortgaging rather than focusing on building this team for long-term sustained success.
Yeah. I know, like, we we've had like a little bit of a disagreement on how we should build for the future. Like Tony, you're more into like trading for younger guys or signing younger guys. Me and Colin thinking about using homegrown talent, but as you just pointed out, we don't have that many draft picks. I do know that this year's third rounder that we don't have, it was included in the Tarasenko trade. So that's a perfect example of the Rangers going all in on a veteran player, and then now we don't have draft capital this year. So that helps further prove your point as well, Anthony. But, despite like the little disagreements that we've been debating this episode, I think for the most part, we're all kind of in the same boat. We're like, it'd be really cool if it happened. Guentzel would definitely help us or raise our chances of winning a Stanley Cup. But whether it come in the form of average annual value or draft picks or what be it, it might be just too expensive to happen. So if it happens, cool, but we'd be saving a lot of money if it didn't. So whatever happens, I'd be happy either way. We either dodge a bullet or we get a higher chance at winning the Stanley Cup. So that pretty much concludes my thoughts. Do either of you have any final closing remarks?
Yeah, just to reinforce my thoughts and opinions. If Guentzel gets brought over here and he's playing on Broadway next season, I'm going to be happy about it. I don't want anybody to think that I'm like so anti acquiring Guentzel. Like I'm not feeling that way. I'd love to see it happen. I just think that it's important to point out that the future of this team also needs to be focused on. And Chris Drury has done a lot of mortgaging of the future for the present. And I do think there needs to be a shift here. Now that we're seeing some of these players, these superstars that the Rangers have, maybe start to have that regression and start to decline, I think is Zibanejad being the primary example that stands out in my mind. Now that you're seeing some of that drop off in production, or at least postseason production, it really reinforces the idea that the Rangers not only need to build for now and add talent to make an impact in 2024, but they also need to find players who are going to make an impact in 25, 26, 27, so on and so forth. So, yes, the Rangers do have some incredible talent in their prospect pool, but adding more talent to that prospect pool or adding more young talents to their NHL roster, those should be the priorities for me. I think that there are definitely ways to find younger guys who still have a little bit of potential to unlock, trade for those guys, have them make an impact now, and hopefully turn them into big time stars in the future. So that's where I'm leaning. But again, if Guentzel ends up wearing a blue shirt, I'll be happy about it. I just think that the focus point should be in a different direction.
Yeah. And I see that point. The last thing that I want to say, because I know this will make you happy, Tony, you talk about a big power forward to play on the first line, maybe not now, but in a few years from now. I saw Statboy Steven tweeted this one prospect, which the Rangers have the 30th overall pick in this year's draft in the first round. That's when our first round pick is. And this one guy, I don't know how to say his name, but Dean Litorno, I think. He's 6'7", and he's a center, projected to go around number 30, committed to Boston College next year. So he's going to be playing with Gabe Perreault. He could be a New York Ranger soon. So
that's intriguing.
That could be our big physical forward that we get. But well, I'm sure we'll get into the draft discussion as it gets closer. But Colin, did you have any final thoughts?
Not really. I think we covered a lot of it. It's just everything is just going to be the only counter argument that I have for what Tony's saying. This is going to be the last thing, because I mostly agree with what you're saying. Like, you're not wrong in a lot of what you're saying. The only problem is players like that we're talking about don't hit the market often. They're usually retained. They want to stay. They're there building something with their own team. So it's hard to find a guy that's going to fit the timeline of also the future. Like Marty Natchez is, like I was talking about it the other day. He's kind of the example of he could help win now. Well, also he's only 25. He sets us up for the future as well. But players like him don't really hit the market a lot. Like teams spend a lot of draft capital on them, spend a lot of time developing them, and then by the time they're starting to blossom into the player they're supposed to be, it would be like us at this point letting Lafreniere go. That would suck. Nobody wants to do that. So, like, I get what you're saying, but it's also hard to do that. And then we're also talking about not mortgaging the future, but then you're trading. You're going to have to give up a lot to get a player like that in terms of a trade as well. So it seems like no matter what, you're probably going to give up a good chunk of future getting a guy for the future. Like, it's either you keep the picks and you don't get the guy, or you trade the picks, but then you get the guy. It's like either way, something's going, because it's so rare that a player like that hits the open market. Not that it never happens, but like a player young enough to not even be considered in their prime yet, who's developing into what could be a star. It just doesn't happen every day. So like, I hear what you're saying. It's a interesting circumstance, and it's hard to find yourself in it. But I mean, obviously, if you get the opportunity, you go for it, because why not? But I feel like now more than ever, it's just going to be bargain hunting. I think with the way that we have our team assembled and the cap that's been doled out to some players who are undeserving of it, I think it's just going to be going out there trying to find a guy with like a 10 times better Blake Wheeler, a guy who's going to go out there and can actually play on the first line. Obviously, it wasn't Wheeler's role; he wasn't supposed to do that, but it's going to be something like that where we can try and sign a guy for around like $4.5 million, who put up 20 something goals last year and can maybe spark that first line. And I also want to mention, I don't think that Mika's on the decline. I think one bad year in his career, this is the first time he's had to step back in a while. He also just had a kid, so I feel like that played a role in the offseason of how he approached it and things like that. Obviously, that's not like the best excuse. But I think that one bad year doesn't define him. I think that he had, 90-something points last year? Or 80-something points last year? Like he was a point per game last year. And 2 years ago, he was an absolute stud in the playoffs. The year we went to the conference final. I know it's a little bit removed, but nobody was expecting the Devils series to go the way it did. And I'm sure if it continued, he would have been better. But I'm not ready to say that he's like on the downswing per se. Let me see his stats here. Yeah, he had 39 goals, 52 assists for 91 points last year. That's not
third highest on the team that year.
Not too shabby. The year before, 81 and 81. The year before, 50 and 56. The year before that, 75 and 57. That's the same. 74 and 82. Like he's been good. And even still, 72 and 81 isn't that bad. And he was a point per game in the playoffs. He had 16 and 16. I know that obviously we wanted more goals from him, and like in that last round specifically, a lot of his points were meaningless. But it's hard to do point per game in the playoffs, and he was nearly at a point per game pace in the regular season. So obviously a big step back, almost 20 points. Yeah, that sucks. But he had a really, really bad year. And if that's a bad year, 72 points, I mean, I'd take that from a lot of players. So, like, I think he'll bounce back and he'll be fine next season. I think we just need to get him and Kreider the help that they need on that first line. I think that just goes back to me saying we need a first line talent. So to talk about circle, bargain hunting.
Yeah. We'll find our guy. I'm confident in that. Whether it's Jake Guentzel or not, only time will tell. But as we pretty much confirmed, it might be too expensive to happen. So I like the term bargain hunting. That's a good way to put how we should be approaching this offseason right now. But that about wraps up today's episode of Fireside Rangers. If you guys did enjoy, please like, subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss notification. I know we had a little bit of a debate here. Not everyone's going to agree on this one. So I'm curious to know what side of the argument you guys land on. Leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And lastly, be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms at Fireside Rangers. Most importantly, have a good one. And
let's go.
Rangers.